So I am Brandon McGee. I'm the owner of the McGee Law Firm. We focus our practice on estate planning and elder law, which are kind of umbrella terms for a lot of different things. But you guys can, find us on the internet. We're easy to find. But we're here today to focus on Lori and what she has to offer. So Lori, tell us a little bit. First, tell us what exactly that you do. Kind of give us a good overview of what it is that you do.
Sure. I own a local placement service, and what that means is myself and my team, we cover all of Dallas-Fort Worth, and we help seniors and their families, usually the adult children, to find different senior living resources, whether they want to stay home, maybe they want home care. We help to educate them on all of that. And or if it's time to move into senior living, we help with that.
All right. So you guys basically are helping with placement, is that correct?
With placement,
okay.
Or just education on all the different resources. If they're trying to stay home, we want to make sure they're safe at home.
Okay. So how long have you been involved in this industry?
16 years.
16 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And tell us what kind of, I have a story that I tell when I do a presentation. I have a specific story that led me into estate planning and elder law. What is it? What was the catalyst to lead you into this field out of all the areas out there that we can be working in?
My grandmother, she had dementia, and she was diagnosed in the early 90s. And so there weren't a whole lot of resources.
Sure.
We didn't have a lot of financial resources. And I just sort of watched my mother and aunt figure this out and navigate it. And my kids were young at the time. And I'm like, that's what I want to do is work with seniors.
Awesome. And then you, unfortunately, within your own nuclear family, you recently had a medical event occur, which is what probably a lot of people are dealing with that you consult with. So what, tell us a little bit about that. What happened recently in your family?
So on Christmas Day, we were getting ready to eat dinner, my husband and my two kids, who were 26 and 19 at the time. And my husband went to say the blessing and couldn't get the words out. I said, what's happening? And he said, you say it. And I'm like, no, you say some words, because I'm familiar with stroke. And I knew immediately he was having a stroke. And, so he had actually 4 massive strokes. Wow. And so I have been, through ICU, through rehabs, all this with him, and have really learned what it's like being on this side as an advocate for someone you love. Yeah.
And that's the thing, when you work in any industry, and then you eventually become the person that needs those services, it really creates a whole new level of understanding, right? And I think compassion for the people that you're helping. And so, but your husband is now, he survived, right?
Yes, thank God he survived.
And he's doing his best to recover and hopefully come home pretty soon. Is that right?
Rehab, and we're hoping by July. Maybe sooner.
All right. Well, we'll be hoping and praying, guys, that Lori's husband has a good recovery. So with your business, hold on a second. I wrote out some questions here that I thought were really good at the time. What are the key? So you guys assist the healthcare advocates, is that correct?
Yes. Well, we help. Yes, the family member that we help make the decisions. So they call us at different times in the whole process. They may be in the hospital, maybe fell and broke a hip, or maybe just starting to think about downsizing and selling their home. So it's just a different story every time. Okay.
And so this is usually going to be, and I'm sort of, this is what I have in my mind. Tell me if this is right or wrong. So the advocate is normally going to be the family member who, number one, has power of attorney if the person's incapacitated, right?
Yep.
Or they could be the legal guardian appointed by the court if there's no power of attorney. Or we could have somebody who maybe they're not technically mentally incapacitated, but nonetheless, they're in bad shape. Maybe they're advanced in age and they just want like a spouse or an adult child to handle things. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. So this could be like in sort of the informal advocate, meaning that the patient is like, hey, communicate with this kid, right? Or it could be somebody appointed by the court or power of attorney.
Absolutely.
Okay. What are, kind of walk us through, the situation. If somebody, let's say we have, an adult child and the parent maybe has a stroke like your husband did. and then let's say there is mental incapacity, what are kind of the primary responsibilities that are going to kick in for that person that they're going to need to start dealing with and paying attention to?
So it's going to be, how has the stroke affected them? If the stroke is, with a medical emergency, sometimes people are fine, and after they go through some rehab, they can go back home and maybe just, some services to come in and continue with rehab at home.
Sure.
But sometimes the stroke may affect them where they are not safe at home. They can't care for themselves. And that's when we get into talking about, are we looking at assisted living, or are we looking at more memory care? And
Right.
it's just different for everyone.
Okay. And then, so, from the big picture items are, what kind of care do they need to be in? And then it's also can be, I guess, smaller things such as, who's going to be their treating physician? Do we like what this physician has to say, or do we feel like we need a second opinion from another doctor, and all those kinds of things, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. What are, and I mean, this is probably self-explanatory, but I work in this industry every day, so maybe people watching don't know this quite as well, but what do you consider to be some of the key benefits of having a preordained healthcare advocate, meaning somebody that's actually maybe has a good set of powers of attorney, not the person who's kind of flying by the seat of their pants, and then something happens and the family's trying to figure things out? What are the advantages of already kind of having this preordained family member?
Well, I think you definitely need to do your planning in advance and have the family member know what your wants are,
Right.
Because you're in the hospital, you can't speak for yourself. And, experiencing that with my husband, I had to make decisions for him,
Okay.
medical decisions. But also you want to have someone who knows your information, have power of attorney for you, or at least know your financial situation, because a lot of times people will call us and they have no clue what,
Right.
How much money they have, what the parent's financial situation is. And that makes it really hard for everyone to figure out. So, I mean, I've always said, be proactive.
Yeah.
And even, now for myself, having experienced it, how important it is to know even something as simple as, the code for a phone, a cell phone.
Right.
Because I found myself having to break into my husband's phone and use Face ID to open up some different some things to figure out, his healthcare and things that he had, portals and stuff for.
So I think, guys, kind of what she's getting at is so number one, of course, it's good to have the person appointed. And this is what I'm a big advocate of this, is that so we don't have family squabbles. If maybe like one parent's deceased and the other parent suddenly has that bad stroke and loses her mental capacity, and there's 3 kids, sometimes we'll see adult children who maybe there's been underlying tension start kind of jockeying for power and positioning for power. And so we can avoid that. And then, like she was saying, when you have the advocate, I mean, sometimes people ask me, should I let my kids know that I've done this? Well, heck yes, you should let your kids know. They need to know that if something happens to you, here's what you're supposed to do. Here's all the documents that you need. If you guys have worked with us, we provide a flash drive with everything digital. And then, like she was saying, like Lori was saying, you want to give them as much information as possible. So when we do our comprehensive estate planning, we normally have a property schedule where we list out all the banking information. I mean, most of us know, like, okay, this is my mom's house and this is my mom's car, but we don't necessarily know where our parents bank. We don't necessarily know, where their retirement accounts are. And so having all this information can be extremely helpful. So with you guys, let's talk about this. So one of the biggest way that you normally help the families is going to be finding the appropriate care facility. And so tell me if this is kind of pretty close to being correct. The most important thing is the level of care the person needs. Is that right? Okay. So we're going to get I'm going to have you kind of go off on that in a minute, but then we also, of course, have what is the budget of this person, right? And then maybe we also have what's the preferred geographical area, because if somebody's family is in Western Fort Worth, maybe we don't want to go to Rockwall for a care facility because it's a big headache to try and go visit the person. So I think for most families that I deal with, guys, the parameters are the level of care, the budget, and then the location. Hopefully we can find somewhere near the healthcare advocate and other family members. But let's talk about level of care, because this honestly, a couple years ago, well, 3 years ago, my mother-in-law went into the assisted living system, I'll call it. And then, would have a big bad episode and go to the hospital and then come out and need a higher level of care. But then maybe she'd stabilize, she could go back to a lower level of care. But I was amazed, guys, at how much I didn't know about that. Like, I really thought I had a pretty good grasp on the levels of care, but there's all these grades in between that I had no idea they existed. So kind of walk us through the assessment and then the different levels of care that are available to people.
Great. Yeah, so there is, obviously assisted living, and what people don't know a lot unless you, had to experience it, assisted living has two prices. So you go in and you pick out the apartment that you want. So they actually have, apartments or studio, 1 bedroom, even some have 2 bedrooms. So it's going to depend on your budget. And then the nurse at the assisted living facility will do an assessment to figure out level of care. And everyone does it a little different, but it could be like level 1 through level 4. Some use point systems, but what they're doing is figuring out, okay, do they just need help maybe with showering or a little like reminders maybe to take their medication.
Right.
That would be kind of like a lower level of care. Or is it something like they need help getting, out of bed, into a wheelchair, bathing, everything. It could be a very high level of care.
Okay.
And then we get into memory care, is if they are either wandering or having behaviors or just really, far advanced.
They completely lost their mental capacity.
Yeah, and it's just going to be a better fit to be in a memory care, because memory cares they do programming, they're geared towards people who have
that's a different situation than the person that just physically needs a high level of care.
Exactly.
Completely different.
And then we work a lot with these residential care homes, which are another great alternative for assisted and for memory care. They're smaller houses and neighborhoods basically, and they can be less expensive and more, like home-like.
Okay. And so in a lot of these, so for example, we noticed with my mother-in-law that at one point we put her in an assisted living place, and they did not go up to skilled nursing. And then when she was doing all this back and forth in the hospital, I speak in the past tense because she did pass away about a year and a half ago, but we at one point determined that she needs a place to where they have assisted living, and then they go all the way up to skilled nursing, because it was really, she might have had some moderate dementia, not bad, but to her, it was really frustrating to keep moving to different places and having to get used to new staff members and new neighbors. And so we eventually figured out we need to get her in a place where they can meet any of her needs depending on what's going on. Is that something that you would recommend potentially?
Yeah, and it again depends on budget as well.
Right.
There's a lot of communities where you have assisted living and then you have memory care, so you have 2 separate wings. Those are great because if you do have dementia and need to transition, you can move into the memory care, or they're good for couples who maybe one has dementia but the other just needs assisted living. We've
had that in my practice too. And another thing, guys, is that we just we discovered it was okay. It is what it is. But like you may go in somewhere, you may put your loved one somewhere, and you're told, okay, it's X amount of dollars per month. But what you need to find out is, well, if we have to go up in levels of care, how much is it going to cost? Because my mother-in-law would come home from the hospital, and it's like she had been at one level. Now she needed to go to the next level or next 2 levels, and it's X amount of dollars more per month. Is that's kind of how it works,
that's
right?
How it works. So the higher your care needs go, the more it's going to cost.
So if you're going to go into the lower level of care, guys, don't just kind of have in your mind, well, this is how much it costs. Because if your loved one starts to deteriorate and decline in their health status, it may end up costing more than that, and as time goes on. So be very vigilant about that. Okay, and let me ask you this. So this is a reality. This is a perception. There is no way around this. It is what it is. But to some degree, maybe to a large degree, I don't know, care facilities don't have necessarily great reputations. Like there's this sense of trepidation of the treatment that the person's going to get. I've heard awful stories of things that have happened. And then I've had clients who they feel their loved one had an overall good experience, right? But there's enough bad apples out there to kind of spoil the mentality to where people are really just do this as a last resort, I think. So I'm curious, are you, and of course I would never ask you to name names, of course, but do you guys have the ability to maybe say to somebody, maybe they're going to come to you and say, well, I've researched these places. Are you there? Can you kind of serve as a sounding board to say, you know what, I might not go to that place and I might look at this place.
Absolutely.
So kind of talk to us about this issue. You have to hear a lot about this from family members and concerns. What tell us about that?
We do. And I think especially after COVID, we saw more and more of this. Things just changed. It's harder to keep people, to keep staff. Like with any, every industry, I think senior living was hit pretty hard. Some of the communities bring in staff that, don't actually work for them, but they work through like an agency. And, so we do hear some bad situations. We are in and out of the communities though, so we're laying eyes on them. We also have, our resources, people who maybe are hospice or home care who are in there, and we get the scoop on, what's going on.
Okay.
But we also tell people, if you have a feeling, or even if not, if you're just looking at a place, go at different times, go in the evening. And I've done this myself for my husband, because the rehab he's in.
Yeah, it's true. Your husband's right.
It's actually licensed as an assisted living. So I've gone, 6 o'clock in the evening. I've gone, early in the morning. I go different times, kind of like trying to catch him, if you will, because he can't, in the beginning, couldn't tell me if something was not right. So, you just kind of watch those things.
So basically, being a constant, having family members, whether it's you or it's like, if you have siblings or other people, but being a constant presence is going to, maybe if we do have, we'll call them potentially bad actors. And a lot of this, guys, honestly, when I hear, negative stories, here and there, it's intentional, bad things. A lot of times it's more neglectful type stuff, like, not cleaning them as much as they want, and things that are just more on the neglect side, as opposed to just somebody intentionally doing something really terrible. But if they know that family members are going to come here regularly, and we never know when somebody's going to pop up, are they probably more likely to kind of be on to keep this person in good order?
I think so.
Do you think so?
I think so, because especially if you get to know them, and I've always told people this too, if you have to go into a nursing home, especially, make friends with everyone there, bring them muffins or whatever you want them to like you.
and guys, let me say this. I mean, God knows that attorneys tend to have a bad reputation. So I'm not, I want to be very clear that I've had clients that have had, they say their family members had a good experience in certain places. I know firsthand from my mother-in-law, there were certain caretakers at the facilities that she really, really liked, that she got an attachment to. So I don't want to paint the picture that it's all negative, but it does have that perception in the public and with a lot of my clients that come in to talk to me. So that's why I just wanted to address it, but I think, again, being a constant presence, like Lori was saying, not having a specific day or time of day that you show up, having them never know when you're going to appear. And then, of course, the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So
100%.
I know with my wife, she's no wilting flower. And so when her mom was in care, she would speak up like, hey, how come her clothes are dirty? How come this? So in a nice way, feel free to speak up and address the things that you need.
That's the part of being the advocate. And I would say that's true when they're in the hospital as well. Speak up, because there were things I saw in the hospital that, could potentially have killed my husband, and so you have to speak up, not be afraid to use your voice.
Okay. And let me ask you this, and I have my own ideas, but if let's say that you were talking to a neighbor or a friend from church who's a senior, and they were saying, you know, I really need to go get an estate plan in place. I need to do my powers of attorney. I have 3 kids. I don't want to offend any of them. But what's the best way for me to decide which kid is my first choice of healthcare advocate? And just so you know, guys, for you all who have worked with me know this, but we like to put multiple people in the lineup, right? But it's a lineup. It's a depth chart. It's, hey, first choice, second choice, third choice. If you were talking to your neighbor or a friend from church who's a senior, and they're asking you, what's the criteria to determine my best advocate, what would your response be?
I mean, I would, a lot of people tend to think it's birth order,
Yeah,
the oldest
that's popular.
Yeah. But I think it comes down to a lot of times the one that's closest to you, who is physically, in your location closest to you. A lot of times, I mean, it is the daughter, because I think women are we're more caregivers.
Agreed. A lot of times that's correct. Yes. Not always, but the majority of the time, that's correct.
We're gonna make sure things get done.
Yeah.
Men too, but but I would say, just that child that's gonna be the more responsible, I guess, would be the word. And I mean, like for myself, with this happening to my husband, my kids are younger, but I did put my 26-year-old in charge, and then I have my brother as a backup.
Yeah.
So just depends like what age you are and what's going on, but definitely, I think, I'm glad we had done this in advance.
Yeah, and guys, so to kind of echo some things that Lori said and maybe add a couple things. What I tell people is this: number one, we do not want co-powers of attorney. I'm adamant about that because you can see how if we have 2 kids as powers of attorney and they don't agree, and then they start getting upset with each other, it's a big fiasco. So I tell my clients I really don't recommend that at all. And then we look at proximity. If my client says, well, 1 kid's here and 1 kid's in New York or Florida, well, unless the kid here is a total basket case and the other kid's really responsible, let's go with proximity, right? Because this can be weekly, sometimes daily management and things like that. And then past that, if somebody says, well, I've got 2 kids here, well, let's just, like you were saying, I mean, let's pick the one that's going to be more responsive. I mean, somebody might, and it's not always true. It's the 80-20 rule. I learned that a long time ago. There's kind of an 80-20 rule in life. And 80% of the time, probably daughters in a family are going to be more attentive to this kind of a thing. But 20% of the time, it could be a son. That's just how it works out. But, if somebody says, hey, my son I love him, he loves me, but he's super busy with his family and running a business, and my daughter just does more for me than he does. And I mean, I hear that a lot. And so you might want to pick that person that's going to have more time and take it more seriously and be more responsive. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And kind of tell us with your company, how do you guys kind of educate people and navigate them through this process? Like if somebody watching here decides to want to call your company, which, guys, here in a minute, we're going to have her give all the information on how to do that. She has a podcast. She'll tell you all about that. But if somebody wants to contact you guys at Senior Services, what does this look like from the first conversation going forward?
Sure. Well, I mean, education is the key to everything. And that's why we do the podcast, which is called Aging in Style with Lori Williams. We've done over 130 episodes of the podcast. Yeah.
You're whipping my rear end in that department. That's great.
But we cover like all kinds of topics that come up, because I really feel like it's best if you have the knowledge before you have to get in the situation. Now, most people, it's usually they call, if mom fell and broke her hip, what do I do? It's an emergency case. So we do a lot of educating over the phone. We also direct them to different episodes of the podcast that might be good for them. Maybe if mom was diagnosed with dementia, we have a good one on a daughter's journey with her mom through dementia. We also have a lot of information, blog posts, things like that on the website. But we would educate them as to what the next steps are going to look like for them. So say mom fell, broke her hip, she's in the hospital, next step is going to be rehab. Then I like to make a plan in advance, and that's just kind of how my mind works. I always am trying to be one step ahead. So That's how, when we're working with families, we want to keep them, okay, so mom is, she's going to make a full recovery.
Yeah.
Great. Let's get her back home and make sure she's safe. But if she's not, let's look at assisted living or what that next step is going to be.
Okay, and something you just said that I guess I hadn't totally thought of earlier, but you probably the vast majority of the time you are dealing with people in a crisis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, maybe here and there somebody calls you saying, "Hey, we think in a few months we're going to have to transition," but most people, myself included, we're so busy we don't really handle things till that crisis.
Well, and I
So,
don't think people want to think about it.
yeah,
It's
right.
not a pleasant thing.
So
to
you're
think
preaching to the choir. I'm an estate planning attorney.
Yeah.
We don't want to think about dying.
Mhm.
We don't want to think about going to the nursing home. We don't want to think about losing our mental capacity. But guys, as you know, if you've heard me speak or you've sat in here in my office and met with me, there's such an advantage when you prepare in life, when you pre-plan. It's a massive advantage. So I would encourage any of you guys who, whether it's for you or for your parents, if you kind of see that, hey, like with my wife and her mother, it wasn't just necessarily like this one, everything was great, and then this one thing happened. There was a gradual decline, right? And so if any of you guys are in a situation with a gradual decline, you might want to go ahead and reach out to Lori now. Don't wait for that emergency. Go ahead and do it now, and get on top of things so that you have a game plan in place when it gets to that point, because then you're more researched and you're going to have you're not going to be in a big rush, and things are probably going to go smoother, when you say.
Absolutely. And you may be able to prevent some things from happening if you, if you're aware of their home, if you go in and look for things like fall risk. We talk about that a lot because that's typically what happens. Someone falls and that's the game changer. And so we want to prevent that.
And let's talk about, so obviously, just like my business, you're not a free service, right?
We're free for families.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm going to ask. You
Mhm.
are going to get paid by I hate the word facility. I try not to use that. So you're going to get paid by the community that the senior is placed in.
Exactly.
Is that right?
So so if we refer you to 3 places that we think would be a good fit,
right,
and the one that you choose, that's the one, once you move in, then they pay us a contracted fee.
So financial, and that's a better deal than me, right? Because you guys that have hired me know you have to pay me. There's nobody else that's going to do it, so it has to be you. But with Lori, there's somebody else that will pay her. So there's literally no downside, guys, to contacting Lori and to inquiring about what they have to offer. So why don't you go ahead, tell us the different places where people can find you. Tell us how they can access your podcast that you have.
Great. So probably the easiest way is to go to our website, which is LoriWilliams-seniorservices.com, and it's LORI. On there, you have links to all of our information. We have 8 senior specialists in the area that can help you. We cover the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area. My podcast is called Aging in Style. You can find it through the website, or you can find it on wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Apple, and just pretty much everywhere. It's even on Audible. I found it there the other day.
Awesome. Okay, so guys, so it's LoriWilliams-seniorservices.com. So I hope all of you guys will go to the internet, check that out, go to Audible, check out Lori's podcast. And then again, like I said, if any of you are kind of with a family member or seeing a gradual decline, that, I have people telling me this all the time, that, right now my husband he's okay to be at home, but the way things are progressing, I think in the next 6 months, the next year, we're going to have to look at other options. You might as well go ahead and do that now. Again, the more information we can arm ourselves with, we can make a more informed decision, and we can, or even get on a waiting list, right? Because some of these places, guys, will have a waiting list. And if you know that, hey, this might be coming down the pike in the next few months, and then you wait for the last minute, your top 2 choices could be full. So you could get on a waiting list now. So, but thank you so much for joining us. This was really informative. And I want you guys to please check Lori out, check out Senior Services on the internet, and check out her podcast. But thank you guys so much, and we hope you all have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thank you.